Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
The internet is full of half-truths and all-out lies. We've all seen them, and many people on social media complaining about it. Here's your chance to show and prove. WorldAfropedia.com is a black-owned and operated encyclopedia. There are several thousand articles, but we need help. We can't uncover all the truth ourselves. So please, join us and become a writer, editor, or blogger for WorldAfropedia.com today. Every little bit counts. We owe it to the future generations to put the truth out there. Visit WorldAfropedia.com, the African-centered encyclopedia, a global database of African knowledge for the purpose of bringing about global African wisdom and understanding. WorldAfropedia.com.
Distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies. I want to point out first that I'm very happy to be here this evening, and I'm thankful for the invitation to come here to Detroit this evening. I was in a house last night that was bombed, my own, but it didn't destroy all my clothes at all, but you know what happens when fire dashes through. They get smoky. The only thing I could get my hands on before leaving was what I have on now. And it isn't something that made me lose confidence in what I'm doing, because my wife understands, and I have children from this size on down, and even in their young age, they understand. I think they would rather have a father or brother or whatever the situation may be who will take a stand in the face of any kind of reaction from narrow-minded people, rather than to compromise and later on have to grow up in shame and in disgrace.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Wednesday, February 21st, 2018. So I have been told. I had one of our listeners email me earlier today, and they were commenting that, don't forget, today is the 53rd anniversary of the assassination of Minister Malcolm X. And I said, how could I forget the 9-year anniversary of the C.O.W.S return to broadcasting was deliberately picked to go inside with the anniversary of Minister Malcolm's assassination. Certainly something I have remembered, and I would hope folks who listen to the broadcast have remembered and heard throughout the years of us broadcasting. Wanted to make sure I got in quickly. We'll be here tomorrow, Workplace Racism, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. I think last week I returned to broadcasting after my residence was flooded. I know folks were missing the Workplace Racism segment. If you have problems, if you have figured out successful codification, things that work well so that you solve problems on the job, you get all your promotions, you get all your raises, no write-ups, no issues. Great, we need that. But if you are having issues you want to share, we can certainly offer suggestions, codified counter-racist suggestions tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We are listener-supported counter-racist radio. Thanks to all of the folks who have supported, invested for 9 years to keep us on the air. I hope the broadcast has been, continues to be worthy of your time and energy. If you want to support, you can hit my blog, racism-notes.blogspot.com, racism-notes.blogspot.com. PayPal button is in the top right corner. If you are not into PayPal, drop us an email. We'll get you a physical mailing address. Obviously, since the flood, mailing address has changed a few times. So if you are going to mail, or if you're interested in mailing any support, drop an email to make sure that you have the current address. Again, huge thanks. You can also support our wish list at Amazon.com under Gus T. Renegade. Huge thanks to all the folks, generous listeners who supported us, and thanks to all the folks who've listened, shared the archive, shared the program. I hope it has helped you get a more accurate understanding of what white supremacy racism is, how it works, what it means to be classified as white. Last thing I'll say is our introduction to our guest for the broadcast. We had one of our listeners also wrote in within the last few hours or so, and they were talking about plans for next year for the COWS 10-year anniversary, and perhaps having some sort of shindig. And I said, number one, I do not take any broadcast for granted. I don't take it for granted that I'll be able to do the workplace racism broadcast tomorrow. War is being waged against Black people, so I definitely do not just assume that we'll be here and broadcasting a year from now. It would be great if this problem were solved and there were no need for the Context of White Supremacy to be broadcasting 2019. The second point, exactly what Minister Malcolm said in the introduction to today's broadcast, his speech from February 14th, February 14th, 1965, a week before his assassination, where he greeted both friends and enemies in the audience. I am very aware that not everyone who partakes in the COWS is a quote-unquote friend, whether they call in, listen, whatever the case may be. I just certainly do not assume that that's the case. So that's just understanding that war is being waged against us. And last but most importantly, we are about solving the problem of white supremacy racism, white terror domination. That is the business that we are in, solving that problem and doing it as quickly as possible. I don't even call it a celebration, right? Like, this is not happy times, we did 9 years. Really, if anything, it's kind of an admission of failure, because the whole mission, what I've said here, is solve this problem. Constructive information that is about solving the problem of white supremacy racism, and we still have not successfully accomplished that task. Dr. Welsing, grandsister of ours, she said she had a cosmic duty to end white supremacy racism. That's what she said her cosmic duty was. It's in the ISIS paper. She said it repeatedly, not to see how long I can be out on the lecture circuit and see how many copies of my book that I can sell. She was trying to solve a problem. Mr. Fuller, he says we have an assignment trying to solve the problem. That's it. It's nothing else. Our guest for today's program, every single time I've called him, he says, I am on duty. Not I'm trying to sell books, not I'm trying to make this number of appearances. I am on duty about solving a problem. And that is what the Context of White Supremacy, if you get anything from the broadcast, I would hope that is a core principle. This is about solving a problem as quickly as possible, so there is no need at all for a 10-year anniversary of the COWS. Our guest for today's broadcast, he's been with us before. In fact, he was with us last year for our 8-year anniversary. Author, educator, father, husband, always a pleasure to have him on the broadcast. He's had just many super constructive suggestions for us down through the years, and we always appreciate him being generous with his time and energy to come and speak with us. Joining us live once again from North Carolina, our guest, Dr. Kamau Kambon. Dr. Kambon, you with us, sir?
Yes, sir. I'm here, and I'm always on duty for Black liberation.
To be expected for any of our listeners, and you can go to his website, Kambon.org. It's linked in the description, Kambon.org. For any of our listeners, if this is their first time hearing from you, anything in terms of a brief introduction you want to give before we get started?
Yes. Well, I was a great child growing up. I had a lot of fun. I grew up in Brooklyn and met a lot of beautiful, beautiful brothers. There were never, where I grew up, there were never fights. We never got into any fights. I never heard the N-word when I was growing up. It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I first heard that word. And I became a athlete as a teenager, and that really changed my life. I think being an athlete and listening to jazz, Miles Davis, put me on a trajectory that was different from everyone else. And I think those two things, coupled together, really put me in a different frame of mind. And I was out of school for a year, out of high school. I wasn't a great student, but I was intelligent, but I wasn't a great student. And I was out of school for a year, and I worked in the garment center, and then I did get a little job working at IBM, working on punch cards, working on this machine that just kind of went through these punch cards. And by chance, I think they call it serendipity, I went to a all-star game, and I met a man who asked me if I was interested in going to school. And after the experience working in a garment center on 34th Street in Manhattan, I said, yeah, I think school is better than working in such a horrible, horrible place. I mean, you talk about slavery and watching these brothers push racks in the summertime. I mean, it was a horrendous situation. So I went to school, and when I went to school out in the Midwest, I never missed a class, never went to class late. I did all my assignments. And so I was an athlete, so I played basketball. I never missed a practice. And I was never late for class, never late for practice. And then when I went to university, the same thing. Never missed class, never walked into a class late, never missed a practice. And I think that has characterized my whole life. I went to graduate school. I got a chance to go to graduate school. I did other things. I coached in high school. I taught in high school. I think I took off from high school class 3 or 4 times. My roommate and I, we decided to take what we call derelict days, where we were not, we were not ill. We just decided, I think we're getting burnt out, and so we just took some time off. But that was in the scope of our regular sick days. I found out later. But my point is that I was always on the case, and I was very, very, I know Malcolm talks about responsible Negroes, but I can't characterize myself as a responsible Negro. But I think being an athlete really puts you on point with about the value of time and also teamwork. If your team is going to win, you have to subsume your own ability in order for it to coordinate with those on your team in order for you to reach a higher height. And I maintain that every black person in the country should be on a championship team. Because if they're on the championship basketball team or football team, then they will fully understand what it takes to win. And I carry that over to this idea of black liberation, what it takes to win. And so just to kind of fast forward, I did go to graduate school, and not that I was interested in pursuing education, but the very important word, opportunity, opened up. And because somebody made a suggestion, I followed up, I got into graduate school. And my point to our listeners, especially young brothers and sisters, that you're looking for good opportunities, to take advantage of an opportunity to move yourself in a positive direction. And so that's why I recommend people follow up, always track down things, always look for opportunities that could change your life in a positive direction. And so I finished graduate school and found a queen, and we got married and had children, and I got a chance to, without her, I would not be sitting here today talking with you, because she was the one that was the motivation and the impetus for us to change our diets, to become vegans. This was in the mid-'70s, where we stopped eating all meat, all fish, stopped with all dairy products, white salt, sugar. And so, this is the value of an African queen who has understanding about what it takes to keep a family healthy. So we decided when I came to the realization that war was being waged against us, this was in the early 70s, precisely in 73, 74, that's when I knew very frankly and bluntly that white people wanted to kill black people. And when I was struck with that realization, this is when I decided to change. And Malcolm also had a bearing on that. I had been listening to Malcolm over the 7 or 8 years since his assassination. And he was very crystal clear. And when you listen to someone like I call him the honorable, utmost magnificent grandcestor Malcolm X, listening to him, he brings great clarity to the war that's being waged against us. And in one of his lectures, he said to his audience, talking to black people, he says two things. He said, the young people are not afraid of the odds. And when he said that, I know he was talking to me. And he said, if you could go and face 800 Chinese and you're not afraid of those odds, you shouldn't be afraid of these odds. He also said in one of his lectures that it's important for you to see where you fit into the world picture. And having that understanding means that you have to understand the whole world and all the domains of living if you want to change and destroy this system, not reform it. It can't be reformed. So if you want to change it and create a new reality, you have to understand all areas of living. And then finally, I got a chance to, after we changed our names, and I was very clear about changing my name. I wanted white people to know that I was against them. And this is a part of it I did not know at the time. This is African tradition. Your name has a psychological meaning. It also projects, as a child, when your African parents give you a name, it projects who they hope you become. So the aspiration is you have to live up to this name. And that's why the psychological impact and effects of a name are so monumentally important. So we changed our diet, we changed our names. We decided that it's difficult to live in a city because you cannot control the things that you need, meaning the basics. And so we decided to move to the country and launch into self-development, and they call it Kujijagulia, self-determination. We delivered our children at home with midwives. My wife did not take any medicine or medication, and she dealt with herbs. We had midwives that helped us deliver our children, and I was present at that time. And I think as a man, there is nothing greater than to be present when your African queen is delivering a child. I think it just engenders a greater respect for the African woman and womanhood. And I think a African queen, a woman can, I think in my instance, she helped me become a man. But when I met my wife, I had 2 master's degrees. I had a couple of pro basketball tryouts. I had taught high school for a couple of years. And I had done all these things. I was in graduate school working on a doctorate degree, but I still was not a man. And so I say to young brothers in particular, you can't measure yourself by all of this external crap these whiteys inject into your mind, cars and jewelry and all of that. That's not a measure of a man. So, and then I taught in college for 18 years in the Division of Education at a so-called historically black college. And in the area of education, I taught part-time at the White University in African Studies for 10 years, teaching Introduction to Black Studies and Introduction to African Civilization. And I left the university in 2000, I think the college in 2000, university around 2004, 2000. I was actually kicked out of the university. And because of my position about the waters being waged against us. But simultaneously, my wife and I bought a building, and with her as the spark, we renovated the building ourselves and invested our own money. We are not into 501c3. That is a white trap that forces you to change your ideology and reconfigure yourself to comply with their rules. And so we renovated the building, opened a bookstore. We bought the books that we sold out of our own money. And we never got this building financed, through any grants or any of that. And so we had the bookstore for about 11 years, and we brought some of the top thinkers in the country to the bookstore. We had combat sciences taught in the cultural center that seats about 100 people. We had a chess club, African dance, drum class. We had economic development classes. We had a sister circle to help sisters understand what it is to be an authentic, organic African woman. We had a brother circle that did the same thing for brothers. We went through the different domains of growing and developing into manhood. We did a lot of different things. And we had such people as the Honorable Black-tastic Kwame Ture come twice to our place. We had Dr. Khalid. And last week, I think it was the 14th marked 17 years since the death of Dr. Khalid. And we should memorialize Dr. Khalid like Malcolm. We should lionize both of them. They are in the pantheon of black-tastic Africans. And we had Dr. Khalid twice, a brother that I greatly admire, and as the years pass, I admire him even more and more. And this is our brother Steve Coakley. And this brother literally gave his life to black people. And we had Steve there twice, and we had Dr. Ben twice. Man, the list is endless. Dr. Barashango, Dale Jones, Dr. Claude Anderson, whose books are Powernomics, and I can't think of his other titles, but Dr. Claude Anderson, Black Labor, White Wealth. We had George Frazier. His book is Success Runs in Our Race. Dr. Molefe Asante out of Temple University, the head of the only, as I understand it, African Studies PhD program in the country. He came through. We had a beautiful sister out of Chicago that very few people mention her name when they do libation, when we honor the ancestors and the grandcestors. This was Margaret Burroughs. She and her husband opened the DeSable Museum in Chicago, and she came and we had a brunch for her. And we had Ramona Africa from Move in Philadelphia, and she gave a riveting presentation about the government under Wilson Goode in Philadelphia dropping the bomb on the Move compound on Osage Avenue. I think it was May 15th, 1985. And we also had Pam Africa come in to talk about the political prisoners. There are, if our people don't get it by now, that we have many black political prisoners still in prison. And they've been in prison for 35, 40 years, 45 years as these political prisoners because they wanted better conditions for black people in this country. We had one of my favorites, and I felt like I was very close to him. My wife and I just loved this family, Queen Mother Ialua and Baba Herman Ferguson. And we spent time with them, and Baba Herman Ferguson was a close associate of Blacknificent Malcolm X. And he moved to North Carolina and was here for about 4 or 5 years before he made his transition. But he started the Jericho movement after he returned from exile, spending 18 years in exile. And he came back because he felt that the fight for our liberation was here in this country. And he wanted to also to support Assata Shakur. So the Jericho movement is a great movement to help make our people aware of the black political prisoners languishing in these prisons around the country, and we're trying to extract them out of these white welfare systems called prisons. And we've had other speakers come in, but we've met some great people. Dr. Asa Hilliard, if you look at his video online, Free Your Mind, Return to the Source, was a good friend of ours, especially my wife. He helped my wife. He was on her dissertation committee. And so anyway, I'll fast forward that over the years we've done a lot and met a lot of people.
Context of white supremacy. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was it. No, I don't want to take up all the time. Just with the background. So we'll get into what we're going to get into.
Right on. I know when I spoke with you previously, you talked about the significance of ancestors. I mentioned one of our grandsestors, a term you used on the broadcast before in referencing Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. This month, Black History Month, no less, Lerone Bennett Jr. Just passed at the age of 89. Author, he wrote Before the Mayflower, Forced into Glory, which is a spectacular biography on Abraham Lincoln and why he is a white supremacist, racist. But he was black journalist, just years of outstanding work towards black liberation. He just transitioned. Yeah. You also mentioned George Edward Tate and Robert Guillaume. They both transitioned recently as well. Just can you talk about the significance of these ancestors?
Yeah. It's very interesting. These brothers and sisters come to the planet Earth to help us in our understanding about the war being waged against us. Lerone Bennett was and is, and in African tradition, we really never think of anyone dying. They just transition to a higher level. And in this regard, they become ancestors. And I make a distinction. An ancestor is one who's like an aunt, a nice person, an aunt, an uncle, a grandmother, a mother. They're nice people. But a grandancestor is one I distinguish from ancestors who has stepped forward to fight for our liberation. So a grandancestor understands that this is a demonic system that we're in. The system is against all African people, and these now grandsters have been here to pull our coat, to teach us the way that we should go, the things that we should do, just like a chessboard, the appropriate moves that we should make. So Dr. Lerone Bennett, I think he got like 15 honorary doctorate degrees. He deserves the title doctor because his books were really medicine for us before the Mayflower. Now, there's another little book. I was trying to think about it all day, and it did come to me, that was published by Ebony, and it's entitled The Legend of Africania, I think, or Africana. And it's a children's book. It's a hardcover book. I think it was out of print, but it's, as I remember it, it's been like a long time since I got the book, but we got it for our children, and it talked about this character in there, the evil Takata, and but it was beautifully illustrated, and I credit Lerone Bennett, whether correctly or incorrectly, with the publication of that book, along with his other publications. But he's a robust personality, and if you get a chance, you can listen to his analysis of Lincoln and the book Forced into Glory. And he was on a panel at the Schomburg Library in Harlem. And he gives a very riveting account of Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation. And basically, as you said, characterized Lincoln as a racist to the very day he died. And, even the day he died, he said he had a cabinet meeting that morning, and he reinforced his position that he said that he wanted to get all black people out of the country. He said, including Frederick Douglass Barber. And he said, in the last black person out of the country, turn out the lights. So Lincoln was very clear about his position against black people in this country. And Lerone Bennett highlighted that significantly for us. And I don't know much about Robert Guillaume. I just know that I used to see him from time to time when I did have a television, and I just liked that brother. And he had an acid sense of humor. But what really bothered me was that I know his son, I think, committed suicide, and I just put myself in his shoes. I remember, I just felt sorry for the brother. And George Edward Tate, he had a very wonderful career. I think he was labeled the Poet Laureate of Harlem, and he has a great poem entitled The Black Brigade. So we have these heroes and sheroes. Of course, Dr. Welsing is really at the top of the list. Have come here to try to help us, and they leave here, some unrecognized, not given the credit that's due them. But I think in the African tradition, we keep their spirit alive as long as we remember them and call their names. Now, I also have another distinction. We have grandcestors, and then we have great-grandcestors. And a great-grandcestor is one who actually engaged the enemy to defeat the enemy. And I would say some of them would be Bungie Carter, Geronimo Pratt, Jajaga Pratt, Chairman Fred Hampton, George Jackson, Jonathan Jackson, Chris Hani out of South Africa, Steve Biko, and Dide Kimathi out of Kenya. And I would put Fela, the great political musician out of Nigeria, in that category. Charles Deslones, who led the 1811 rebellion in New Orleans, entitled, I think it's called March to New Orleans. I would put him in that category. Of course, Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey. I would put Gabriel Prosser in that. There's a brother, Jimmy Angola. who started the Stono Rebellion. I think it was 1739 out of South Carolina. He would be a great-grandancestor. Dessalines out of Haiti. And I would also include Zumbi of Palmares, Nanny of Jamaica, Menelik, who fought the Italians, and he and his queen. And there are others and who actually engaged. And so I do put them in a category called the great-grandancestors, because they actually, I don't know if I mentioned Nat Turner, but of course, Nat Turner, and there's others that I would include in that category. So we have great black-plastic, utmost black-plastic ancestors, grandancestors, and great-grandancestors.
How do you relate the recognition, grandancestors, folks who have contributed their life currency towards Black liberation? How do you relate that to African spirituality, and even what do you mean when you say African spirituality?
Okay, that is very interesting. I have yet to see a definition that I know of for African spirituality. And I've come across so many different people who express African spirituality in various forms. But when I say that the spirit of the person lives on, for example, like we commemorate, and this thing, going back to the anniversary of Malcolm's assassination, I don't quite think that's the appropriate word, anniversary. I think it's more memorializing or lionizing. Anniversary to me conveys, like a wedding celebration, but not the tragedy like an assassination. So for me, I need to give that deeper thought, but I know that the word anniversary doesn't really, sit in the pocket well for me when we talk about someone who has been taken off of the earth in such a brutal manner. So this idea of African spirituality, what was the question again on it? Kind of went off.
Well, first, what do we mean, or what do you mean when you say African spirituality? And then how does that relate to this concept of grandancestors? And how does that even relate to Black liberation?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one thing, Dr. John Henry Clarke makes a very interesting statement. And, Dr. Clarke, of course, I would include him as a grandancestor, Dr. Ben, Herman Ferguson, Amos Wilson, and others, Robert F. Williams, Mabel Williams, Barbara Hannibal Afrique, I didn't mention him. These would all be grandancestors. And Dr. Clarke makes a statement. He said that he is one of the most spiritual persons in our race. Now, he was not initiated into any African spiritual system, as far as I know. And I think that to be spiritual in its essence is to be tied to the people. Like I think George Jackson said, give your life for the people. So you have to be at a high spiritual level. That's the only word I can think of, because you can't measure it. But to link yourself with the condition of the people, to be with the people, to be for the people. And I think a person has to have supreme empathy mixed with action in order to be fully spiritual. And empathy means, not only to put yourself in someone else's shoes, but also to go out and move to help that person or people in that condition and situation. And I'm sure there are gradients of spirituality. I can't lay that out, but I think they're gradients. So that's why I distinguish, grandancestors, those who, may have come out and they've given lectures, but then there are those who say, hey, we're going to engage the enemy. See? So I hope that kind of puts it in a perspective. But I don't have a definition for African spirituality. I know what vibes with me, but I see people who say they're spiritual, but they have no knowledge of the genocide that's against us. They are self-contained in this pocket of spirituality and have seemingly no regard, or they might articulate a regard for the people, but they're not doing anything to improve the quality of water, to improve the quality of air. So they say, okay, well, I'm spiritual and I love water. But okay, you love water, but have you written a letter to the water department about all the chemicals they're dumping into the water? Have you been down to the river to clean it out, to see the plastic bags? There's a brother, I listened to this report in D.C., there was a brother, I think he got out of prison, but he went to the Anacostia River, I think it was, and he was so appalled at the condition that he got together some young people, and they started taking the plastic bags and the tires out of the river. And they've done this for years, and they've pulled out hundreds of tires and debris that's been in the river. So to me, that's a spiritual person, even though he's not in any spiritual system, as far as I know. So that's why I say it's empathy plus action equals spirituality. So I hope that kind of pulls it together.
That does help. Context of White Supremacy, Dr. Kamau Kambon. If you have questions, the number 641-715-3640, the code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I was speaking with Dr. Kambon. The cows, we had like a 2-month interruption basically when my residence was flooded in December. And I was telling Dr. Kambon, same thing that I told listeners have been talking about this year, that it could have been a really bad situation because already being displaced, racial dislocation, and then just being bombarded with really bad food. And Dr. Kambon, he's spoken on the program before about, a major part of the war that's being waged against us is happening on our forks, on our plates every day. And we were just being bombarded. When I say we, myself and the other flood victims, we were being bombarded with just bad food, just every day. And I finally, began saying something about it, like regularly, like, man, are we being punished? Like, why do we have to have fried chicken every meal? Why do we have to have, just garbage? Like, why can't we have more fresh fruits and vegetables? And I told listeners just a few days ago when we got back on the air that the words of Dr. Kambon, I remember them, where he was saying, you got to have all your cells in alignment, and you cannot just be eating potato chips and trash on a regular basis. And I said, this situation could go from really bad already to, we could all gain, 30 pounds and still be miserable and displaced. And I just start from that moment, really from the flood, just started eating much better. Regressed to being vegan. Think that was already mentioned on the program, taking better care and doing yoga. I went to yoga this morning at 6:30 a.m., just like I did yesterday. Have been doing yoga religiously for the entire year. I told them I dropped about 25 pounds, like feeling phenomenal, just great shape, but just really, really emphasizing self-care and saying, at a time of crisis, to really make self-care a number one priority. And I was explaining this to Dr. Kambon, and he said, particularly for Black people, where war is being waged against us every day, all areas of people activity, he said that in times of acute trauma, it is just exponentially important that we make self-care a priority. Can you expound, Dr. Kambon?
Mhm. Yeah, unfortunately, and I see that when people struggle with severe stress and trauma, they spiral into self-destruction. And I've seen that, through a lot of my friends when they were in difficult situations, either family situations or with unemployment. Then they start drinking and hanging out. And so actually most of what I say is based on my observation. And, a lot is on research, reading and listening to different people and synthesizing what they've had to say. But I've actually just seen the cold reality, the raw, stark, unvarnished reality that people just go downhill. So I learned from that, say, okay, that's not good. The best thing to do is when you're in difficulty, that's the time to take the best care of yourself. And that works. That I know it works because I kind of look at it. I don't know if you remember the old films where you take out a roll of film and you can see each frame. And I used to explain it this way, that you're in one frame, and if you don't take care of yourself in one frame, when you get to the next frame, you're going to be in worse shape. And then you move to the next frame, you'll be in even worse shape. So life is like that. You have these different frames or different panels. You go from one to the other. And when you get in the next frame, you have to be in good shape to deal with what is coming at you. So if a person keeps going down and going down, they're going to wind up in the hospital. So this is the goal, one of the goals of the white terrorists, to get you in the hospital. And in my book, The Last Black Man Standing, it said that when the doctors get you in the hospital, they're not looking at a person, they're looking at the organs. And they're saying, wow, these kidneys are worth $2 million. These lungs are worth so-and-so. The liver is worth this amount. And so they just see dollar signs. And the person really is exploited when they get into the hospital. Actually, there was a lecture I heard where the guy said the third leading killer in the country is medicine. And I think he got it incorrect. I think the biggest killer in the country is hospitals, doctors, and medicine. So this is the last place you want to be, is in the hospital. So when you get depressed, when you're really down, you have to force yourself. I have a piece of my Kambon-dime. It says you have to exert your will. So, the white terrorists, they have superimposed their will on us. And that is one of the things that brings us down. So now we have to bust out of that and exert our will to take better care of ourselves.
What would your response be to some folks who say, hey, Dr. Kambon, it gets hard? Like, I've even heard you before say that, from time to time, that you might have to put your head down for a moment, just from all of the stress and terrorism that we're subjected to on a constant basis. Not for a long time, but just for a brief moment, it might get to you a little bit. And that's understandable. What do you say to someone who says, hey, at that moment of crisis, especially, it's tough for some people. They might find it almost impossible to take good care of themselves, to go out and try to exercise and to put the time in to eat correctly and to cook and to rest correctly, to make sure that you get to bed early in the evening, and not to be doing a whole lot of alcohol. That in those times, that is especially difficult to exert your will towards self-care.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a piece on my Kambon-dime which we get a chance to talk about, and it is actually the last aspect, and it says positive, strong self-talk, T-A-L-K. And you have to have positive, strong self-talk all the time. And as you practice pumping yourself up, yeah, come on, I can do it. I can, I got it. I can get this. I got this. When you practice doing that over the course of time, when you encounter that moment, now you have something to go back and draw on because you've been practicing it. You see, we have to, when I say exert our will, these are things that we have to institute in how we live. And this positive, strong self-talk is you're your own cheerleader. I don't mean to be unrealistic about it. You got to face reality. But when you start practicing these different things, like when I started practicing putting the white clothes on the bottom and the black clothes on the top, when I, put things away, I practiced that over the years. I practiced saving water. I practiced these different things. So a lot of the war being waged against us is psychological war. It's in all areas, but especially psychological warfare. So this is why I say that we have to stop committing these different forms of subtle suicide. We got to de-whitenize so that when the stress comes down, there's not much that the stress can grab onto to bring us further down, because we've been practicing how to throw it off, how to throw it off, how to throw it off. So remember, we're in war. So I go back to, I think I talked about Onodo Hiro, O-O-N-O-D-O. I haven't talked about him in a long time, but that was the Japanese soldier who kept fighting in World War II. The war was over 29 years ago, and he didn't know it. But he was foraging, he was still out in the woods, and he was stealing food, but he was still, I think that's a great story, that he was still fortified. Despite the fact that no other soldiers were with him, he was out there by himself, but he was compelled through strong, positive self-talk to keep going. So, and I think that these are the things that we have to practice, and this is what we have to teach children. You're going to come across these rough times, and so you got to practice and be prepared for that. So that's my answer.
Context of White Supremacy. If you have a question for Dr. Kambon, the number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. You have mentioned, yes, sir.
Yeah, I was going to say also, I come also from an athlete's perspective and as a coach. When I play ball, and I could see on the team, if we're down and we're losing, I could see some of the guys on the team, man, they put their heads down. I said, come on, man, you take somebody like Michael Jordan, as an athlete. Not off the court, but as an athlete, he's not going to lose. But this other guy, I can't think of his name, man. But they have this. That's why I say it's important to be on a winning team, because you know what it takes to win. Even though it seems like you're losing. They say you got to leave it on the court. So you got to give it all, and so that's why it's important to learn how to win. and to push through that period of time that's difficult so you can get to the end. Now, I'm not saying, as an athlete, there were times that we pushed to the end and we lost, but hey, we gave it everything we got, you see. And that's what's important. And the other thing, I want to get to this definition of black liberation and this little idea I have about it before we close out. But you were going to ask a question.
Yes, sir. You had mentioned it, the Kambon system. I wanted you, if you could explain Kambon-dime. Sorry, Kambon-dime. If you could explain what that is.
Okay. Dr. Welsing said that everywhere the white people landed, this is going back to the 14th, 15th century, everywhere they landed, they saw people of color. They quickly realized that white would disappear if it connected with Africans or black people. And I could imagine that when the Africans called the Moors, see, now they are called Moors, but they were Africans who crossed the Mediterranean, and they were called Moors, but they were Africans. When they went into Spain, and this is probably where the white people really learned that white would disappear. Because I guess after 200 years, the Africans being in Spain and seeing these white women who had bad teeth, they had lice in their hair, they smelled bad, they had their cycle, they didn't know how to clean themselves, they never took baths. But I guess after 300 years, they started to look good to these Africans. But when they got together, the outcome was a child who had color. So that's how they learned that white would disappear. So Dr. Welsing talked about that. A group, Dead Prayers, also said everywhere the white people went, they messed it up. But they also knew that white would disappear if they came in contact with the Africans. So the Kambon-dime is a system designed to, let me put it this way, it is a multifaceted, and you may want to write all this down. I'm not going to give you the whole context, but I'm going to give you most of it. It's a multifaceted, multi-level, contextualized, dynamic, effective, systematic, sorting out, that's SORT, sorting out reference guide, designed to assist, and you should write the word me, you're going to write me, to assist me in, and I'm going to give you 5 things, in recognizing, in critically, comparatively analyzing, evaluating, explaining, and categorizing almost all actions. So this is a reference guide. That's dynamic, means it's fluid. It's in context. We're seeing the whole system. And it's very effective as a reference guide to help me understand what is going on. I'm able to recognize various elements in the system. I'm able to critically, comparatively analyze the different aspects of the system, to evaluate it, explain it, and then put it in a category. Kwame Ture tells us, organize, organize, organize. So what I've done is I've organized this whole system, the external system, which is the white male, who is the biggest problem on the planet Earth, and the white system, the black community, and what each African does in each of these different domains of living. Okay, so that's the first part. So it teaches us how to recognize, analyze, etc. And it's looking at all actions. Now, all actions, I'm qualifying it relative to before I go forward, do you understand this first part as part of the definition? It's a multifaceted, multi-level, contextualized, dynamic, effective, systematic, sorting out reference guide to help me understand all the actions that I see, or almost all actions that I see. And it's teaching me how to characterize and evaluate this. For example, let's say recognize, critically, comparatively, analyze. So I'm walking down the road. You're walking down the road. You look in the distance. You see something on the ground. So you're recognizing. Then you look and you say, it's kind of moving wiggly. So now you're critically, comparatively analyzing. Well, what moves like that? Then you're evaluating it. Say, well, I think a snake moves like that. Then you're explaining. Man, then I hear it rattling. I hear a rattle. So now you evaluated it, you're explaining it, and now you're going to categorize it. Wow, I better get out of here. That's a rattlesnake. So these 5 things enable me to evaluate all action, or almost all actions. Now, we're going to qualify it and say, relative to, I'm looking at all these actions, relative to understanding the white man's deceitful, demonic, destructive defense, formations, and tricks. So I'm looking at all these actions relative to understanding the white man's deceitful, demonic, destructive defense, formations, and tricks. So now I say that when we are looking at the actions of our enemy, we are going to evaluate all these actions, and we are going to, in looking at these actions, we determine that there's deceit, there's destruction, but the main point is that most of what I think white people are doing is that they are on defense against African people. And what do I mean they're on defense? I think that all their actions are defense, or most of their actions are defense actions. Jim Crow was defense. The shooting of black people, they're on defense. So I have this statement that says that the best offense is a super great defense. So they are on defense. And then I also say that the best defense is a super great offense. Now the Africans, all we have to do is show up. We're on offense. I have a friend of mine, he said he was in Germany in the service. And he said, his clothes hadn't arrived, his civilian clothes hadn't arrived. So he was in his uniform, and he and his friend, they went to a club. And as they walked into this club, this white club in Germany, he said as soon as they walked in, everybody in there froze. All the white people in there froze. And the bartender said, hey, you can't come in. But when he said that to me, I said, because just you showing up, you're on offense. And their freezing was their defense. So those are the 2 parts. There are 2 other parts to this that I won't go into, but it fully explains that this whole idea about the Kambon-dime is a complete system that it explains almost everything. And it also includes how we commit different forms of subtle suicide, that we've been sucked up into white pathology and white welfare, and we're committing these different forms of subtle suicide. Then I explain how we should get out of killing ourselves. And one of the words I really want to interject into this conversation is self-determination. Listen carefully to the word. Self-determination is one of the second principle of Kwanzaa, which is kujichagulia, self-determination. But I don't look at it the way most people look at it. When I say self-determination, that's D-E space termination. D means not. Termination, that we are not going to destroy ourselves. See, determination means the end of it. So we are self-determination, that the white people, according to Ted Turner, the article I mentioned before, Ted Turner wants you dead. He wants to reduce the world population down to 250 to 350 million people. So when I say that, people say, yeah, wow, they want to reduce the world population. Codex Alimentarius said they're going to reduce the population of the world by 4 billion people. So everybody says, wow, that's something. But nobody thinks that's them. They think it's everybody else, not themselves. So when we go out and we drink alcohol and eat chicken and, be hanging out at 3 o'clock in the morning, that is subtle suicide. That's subtle suicide, meaning that we are accelerating our own death process. So under subtle suicide, I have this piece says that I am, I-A-A-M-O-C, I think it is. I am accelerating my own death when we commit these different forms of subtle suicide. So in subtle suicide, according to this Kambon-dime, here are some aspects of subtle suicide. One is that we've been sucked up into white pathology and white welfare. See, the whole white system is a white welfare system, as I pointed out before. And we've been sucked up into this white pathological system. And what the white people have done, I call it CET. They have charmed us, enchanted us, and tantalized us with different forms of death. So I say that they have made death taste sweet. So here you go with the food, the drugs, the alcohol, the cable TV, the All-Star Game, the World Series, the Super Bowl. See, they got us yo-yoed. They're yo-yo, all of BET Awards, the Grammys, the this, the that. These are all different forms of subtle suicide to keep us disattracted. And so what is the attraction? The attraction is black liberation. So we have these different forms of subtle suicide. And so they make death taste sweet. I heard this side the other day and I chuckled. The side is, I'm your puppet. And as soon as I heard that, I thought about black people. Because the white people are the puppeteers and we've become their puppets. And then we also have become co-signers on our own death warrant. See, so the white people have issued a death warrant on African people. And by engaging in certain behaviors, we are co-signing. And not only do we co-sign, but we also become collaborators, or Mobutus, who was the one that killed Patrice Lumumba of the Congo. And his name is synonymous with collaborator. So these are some of the different forms of subtle suicide. In addition to that, in subtle suicide, I'm focusing on black people now, in subtle suicide, we have we have self-deception, where somebody comes and tells us something that's true, and we say, no, that's false. That's self-deception. Somebody comes to us with something that's false, and we say, no, that's true. So these are different forms of subtle suicide, and then in the Kambon-dime, I show how to get out of and extract ourselves from the different forms of subtle suicide, which are psychological, cultural, economic, education, health, religious, social, political, in the area of math, science, and technology, also in the area of matter, motion, space, and time. So these are all the different ways that the whites are coming against us. So I show specifically how to get out of the different forms of subtle suicide and to escape the different forms of death that have been aimed at us. So when I say black liberation, I want to go through this part slow. I say I make a point that that in black liberation, I don't commingle, confuse, contaminate, cross-pollinate, or spoil black liberation with elements from, and I'm going to give you two words, you can fill in the blank. I don't mix them with elements from the tapestry or constellation of subtle suicide, open-ended idea formations. Now, I want that to make sense. I don't commingle, confuse, contaminate, or cross-pollinate, or spoil the purity or the pureness of black liberation with elements from the constellation or tapestry of subtle suicide, open-ended idea formations. In other words, most black people, let me finish this part. The idea formations that have no black liberation endgame or destination. So I hope that's coming across clear. I don't mix any of that with any of these elements that have no black liberation conclusion, destination, or endgame. In other words, most black people are on a stationary bike-like or trapped in strands of thought that have no goal or target. So they're trapped in these different elements that actually keep them, and you can write these 4 or 5 things down, that actually keep them on this treadmill, an open-ended treadmill that takes them nowhere. And this open-ended treadmill, these strands of thought, these idea formations, keep a majority of black people in psychological entrapment or ensnared psychologically. It keeps them in a emotional stranglehold. It keeps them under concept lockdown. These different open-ended strands of thought, idea formations, keep black people fighting each other and at each other's throat. These different formations keep a majority of black people in what I call a cultural quicksand, and also in intellectual immobilization. So what are these strands of thought, idea formations I'm talking about, that are open-ended, that have no black liberation, winning end game, or destination? Okay, let me go down the list. These different idea formations, strands of thought: astrology, no Black liberation endgame. The different beliefs, no Black liberation endgame. The different ideologies, open-ended, no Black liberation endgame, target, or goal, or destination. Different misconceptions, no endgame, no Black liberation endgame. Mythologies, a lot of Black people are locked into mythologies. I met a sister, asked her how she's doing. She said, "Oh, we're following the so-and-so diet out of the Bible." You following a diet out of a fiction? Well, if you can quote out of a fiction, out of a mythology, then I could quote from The Godfather, the movie The Godfather, where Don Corleone said, children and women can be careless, men cannot. So I could, if you can quote out of that, out of your mythology, and I can quote Michael Corleone out of the movie The Godfather, where he says, don't hate your enemy. Don't hate your enemy. Hate clouds your perception. So we follow mythologies that have no Black liberation endgame. We follow these different philosophies, these different principles. We follow definitely different religions that have no Black liberation endgame. We have these different secret societies and these social groups that are open-ended, have no Black liberation endgames. We have African spirituality to a greater or lesser extent that have no Black liberation goal, endgame, or target, or finish line. Then we have different theories that are open-ended, no Black liberation endgame. And then we have different traditions. Like they say, well, Christmas is a tradition in our family. Well, what's the end game with that? But everything else has an end game. The basketball league, they have what? The NBA championship. Baseball has the World Series. Corporations, their end game is profit or loss. Everything has an end game except the strands of thought that most Black people are engaged in. And so we're trapped on this treadmill. And maybe this is why we've not gotten anywhere, because we keep going over the same stuff over and over again, and it hasn't produced any evidence that we're closer to our liberation. And so I say that Black liberation ends white terror, domination, and deceit. And Black liberation is the best, it's the greatest, it's the highest, it's the purest, it's the strongest, and it's the toughest concept on earth that is in our best interest and that we should be thinking about all of the time. So I have the expression, we live life on our own terms. But the white people have sucked us up into white pathology and these other strands of thought, open-ended strands of thought, open-ended idea formations that have no end game. And as a result, we keep going over and over the same stuff, education, economics, we go through the same stuff over and over again. And so I think that we have to spend our time. I talked about live life on our own terms, and this is how I break down terms, TERMS. And the first T stands for time. We should use our time to think about engaging in Black liberation activities that will lead to the once and for all solution to the biggest problem on planet Earth, which is the white male, M-A-L-E. The white male is the biggest problem on planet Earth. And so we use our time, and we could use other T's here. We can use talent. We can use thinking or thought-provoking ideas to help us engage in the concept of Black liberation, to think all the time, how can we solve this problem once and for all? Then the E stands for energy, and it also stands for other E's that we can think of. but primarily energy. How do we spend our energy? We all have an expiration date on planet Earth, and we should be using our energy in the most appropriate way, in the most effective and efficient ways that are directing us toward our liberation, and not detracting us, and not taking our energy away. Like I have this thing about, we have a lot of energy thieves. They take our energy from us. They bring a lot of drama to us, negative encounters. All these are energy thieves that take our energy from us. So time, energy, the R stands for resources. It stands for resolve, stands for revolution. So live life on our own terms. Time, energy, how we use our resources. M, how we use our materials and money. And the S stands for either we're saving our time, energy, resources, and money, either we're saving these things or we're squandering them. And under that I have a double S, SS, subtle suicide. Are we engaging in the different forms of subtle suicide that will eat up all of our time, energy, resources, and materials? And I want to just jump back to this idea of African spirituality. We say that and I've heard this, I can't prove it, that our ancestors are watching over us, our grandsters are watching over us, they're guiding us. But I'm thinking, okay, if you have unconscious people who transition to the next realm, and there were millions and millions of Africans are unconscious on this level, are we saying that they've now become conscious on the spiritual level? I'm just asking a rhetorical question. Are they now conscious and now they're working? They get up there and they say, oh, wow, now I understand. So they clearly outnumber the grandsters and the great-grandsters. So there is the Hermetic principles, 7 Hermetic principles. One is the universe's mind. The second is the law of correspondence. As above, so below. So below as above. So if there's confusion and chaos among us here as a result of the white terror dominators injecting confusion, calamity, and chaos among us and in us, is that not the same thing happening in the spiritual realm? So, I mean, this is just a thought for consideration. So this is I hope this comes across in an understandable way in terms of looking at this idea of the purity of black liberation, that I don't want to confuse any of these other elements that I mentioned, astrology, etc., with the purity of black liberation, because in this constellation of these strands of thought that I just named, black liberation is above and beyond this constellation or kaleidoscope of idea formations, because black liberation, in my mind, stands alone. That it's stellar, it's cosmetic, it's in the cosmos, and this is what. And I've always said that the solution to our problem is already in existence. It's in the cosmos. But we have been so trapped on this treadmill, in this spectrum of these different formations, that it has eaten up our time and our energy and our resources. And as a result, as I mentioned, the NBA, the World Series, the Olympics, the BET, the Academy Awards, the next movie, the next game show, the this, the that. And so black people are really being yo-yoed out of black liberation. But the answer, and the white people know this, I know that they know this. And I can tell that they know it, and I pointed out in 2012, is the year that I've been following this, that they stopped in New York City 678,000 young people, mostly young brothers. And, I don't know how many they arrested, but this whole stop and frisk was around the country. Why? I call it's preemption. They're looking for those young people who manifest the attributes, the characteristics, the charisma, the intellect of Malcolm X, of Marcus Garvey, of Queen Mother Ida B. Wells, of Ya Asantewaa from out of Ghana. They're looking for those because they know that out of this whole population, there must be one African that has some sense, that doesn't dig what white people are doing. And this one person is going to come up with the one idea that will solve this problem once and for all. So I talk about the white people. They have a whole white welfare system. And I want to also inject these words. I use the word inject, not interject, because it's like a hypodermic needle putting poison in us. So I'm clear about how I'm using inject. And so they obscure all of these different words to hide who they really are. And such words as the explorers, the pioneers, the pilgrims, the settlers, the land barons, the landlords, the pirates, all of these different words, the bankers, the Wall Streeters, but the word to describe these entities are two words: cesspoolian, the cesspool people, and savages. Now I looked up the word savage. Savage in their dictionary is someone who is uncivilized and barbaric. So I think that's appropriate. I'm not pulling something out of the sky. Cesspoolians is a word I made up because that behavior is like, their behavior is cesspool behavior. It comes out of the bowels of the cesspool. That's their behavior. So that's how I characterize. And I also want to say, I don't subscribe to the word mainstream media. It's not mainstream media. It's cesspool media. Because these same journalists have been the ones over the years who have characterized black people as less than human, thugs, gangsters, and all of that. These are the same journalists that have perpetuated this image around the world. Hollywood, the same thing, perpetuated these images of black people. And they know that what they project, that's not black people. I don't know people like that. I came up with decent adults. They treated each other nicely. They were not thugs, gangsters, bitches, hoes. We didn't have any of that. It wasn't until the white people saw, after Malcolm's assassination, King's assassination, hey, these young people, they don't dig this crap. They're going to do something about it. This is why they dropped the guns and the drugs in the communities. So if a young person is going to get down with drugs, that young person is an idiot. And I looked up this guy, this whitey, Charles Wexler. It's spelled Wechler, something like Wexler. He came up with this bogus intelligence test, but he had these characterizations of intelligence. He had the lowest levels were moron, imbecile, and idiot. These were people who had very low IQs, and there's even a category below that called feeble-mindedness. So if a black person is going to drink alcohol or mess with alcohol and be up at 1 and 2 o'clock at night at a party, that person is a moron. If a brother is mistreating a sister, slapping her, abusing her, He is an idiot. And when we achieve our liberation, we're going to come and we're going to deal with all of these maladies in our community. We're not going to have any of this madness. We're going to get all of this stuff straight. We're not having no homosexuality, none of this, no bars, no liquor stores, no drugs, none of that. All that's out. We're finished with that. Give it back to the white people. And so the expression is what goes around comes around. Yo, that's right. Now the opioid, so-called opioid, and that's a big thing. When black people were dying from ODs, Dean Memminger that played with the Knicks, he OD'd. Why, Dean, man, how you messing with drugs? These guys messing with drugs, ODing. So now it's with the white people. I heard a report that 90% of the white people in Vermont, are on heroin. So they gave it to us. What goes around comes around. So now it's a crisis in the whitey world. They're throwing all kind of money at it. This whole thing about Weinstein and all these white women are coming forward with this harassment. Well, what about all of the harassment that these white savage men have inflicted on African women? Remember the head of the World Bank? Was it World Bank or I think it was a monetary fund, when he was in New York and he harassed that sister,
Dominic,
and she accused him. Right, and she accused him of sexual impropriety, and he got off. So what about all the harassment that these black women have been taking over the years, trying to raise a family, going on these jobs with these predatory white males? Well, what about that? Putting that in this jive fake media. So let's get, if we're going to be real, let's get this stuff on the table. Let's talk about it. Let's get it all straight. And talk about these white females, they're all up in arms about this harassment. But what about these brothers that go on these jobs and these white people just harass them subtly and overtly to force these brothers out of these jobs? They don't get the promotions. I know a brother that was I think he was an astrophysicist. And they have this thing once a month that when somebody comes up with a good idea, they put them at this table. They get a special parking spot. They give them an award. So this brother, he came up with 2 or 3 great ideas. He didn't get any awards. So I talked to him. He was stressed out over this. So what about somebody like that? How do you help him deal with this toxic environment? So there are a lot of things that black liberation will solve. And so I say that black people, you use your energy. Don't misuse your energy. Don't misuse your time on planet Earth fooling with toxicity and white pathology and madness. Disengage, disentangle from subtle suicide activities. Now, I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. We're very feeling people. But we have to deal with these things and get off of this treadmill that keeps us disattracted. I'm using the word appropriately, disattracted. What is the attraction? If we're disattracted, what is the attraction? The attraction is black liberation. So I'm going to end on that piece. You may have some other questions, but I wanted to put that on the table. And I hope it makes sense. This makes sense to me.
Listeners can feel free, dial in if you have questions, if anything, if you would like clarification. The number 641-715-3640. The code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you have a question. Caller at 7722. Did you have a question for Dr. Kambon? You should be with us.
Yes. Greetings, host, and greetings, Dr. Kambon.
Greetings.
Yes, bro.
I just had a brief question. The Kambon-dime that you were expounding earlier, is that somewhere? Do you have that written down in a book that we could get more?
No, it's actually a huge diagram, and it is not quite available yet. I'm still working on it, but I have it all laid out, and hopefully I will find someone who is computer savvy that can help me lay it out in such a way that it's very clear, it's very understandable. So it's not yet available, but it will be hopefully very soon.
Thank you very much. I'll take my call offline.
Okay.
If we have any, computer savvy listeners who have the time and energy, who might be willing to help out Dr. Kambon, getting his concept, bringing it to life, feel free to drop me an email, untiljustice@gmail.com, untiljustice@gmail.com, and I will forward your contact information along. A person who dialed in, I guess you perhaps are using the VOPE line to give us a ring. If you had a question for Dr. Kambon, you should be with us. Carla, who dialed in, you have a hand up. I think you're on maybe the free HD line, perhaps. Did you have a question for Dr. Kambon? Are you just listening? Not hearing. I'm not sure if you have your volume corrected or if you have your microphone, if you're having any tech issues, but we are not able to hear you. Oh, heard that. We can hear you typing away. Did you have a question? Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Hey, how's it going, everyone?
Right.
This is for Dr. Kambon. I've heard someone with your name. His name is Kamau Kambon. Are you two related by chance?
Yeah, that's me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Obadele Kambon. He teaches in the University of Ghana.
Oh, yeah. No, that's someone else.
Oh, okay. I saw the last name and I thought there was some relation.
Yeah, there is. But what is your question?
Oh, I was just I was curious about that because I noticed a lot of what you said. I saw mirrors in the other person, so I thought, maybe you two studied together or your family or something. I'm not trying to intrude. I was just curious about that. But
okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks, bro.
Appreciate that. If we have other folks, if you have questions, I'll nab as we go. Keep an eye out on the switchboard. You going back to my own questions. You also explained that, I guess when we were talking earlier about ancestors, you said you thought it was significant that we keep in mind that grandcestors, Dr. Welsing, Mr. Bennett Jr., others, they are looking down on us. You talked about that we were off the air. Can you kind of explain what you meant there for listeners?
Yeah, let me modify that. Whether it's down or up, I guess this is part of de-whitenizing. This assumption is that those who make a transition are up. I don't know whether it's up, down, or sideways. So what was the question about them?
Just the ancestors, grandcestors, that they are looking down on us, as in like present tense, currently looking down, observing what is happening, the relevance, importance of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is what's coming out of the African communities this is a concept coming out of the continent, that the that even though the flesh dies, the spirit lives. And this is typical. For example, I had a student in one of my classes, Yetunde. She was from Nigeria. And I think she was in my educational psychology class at the HBCU. And I asked her, and I said, that's a very wonderful name. Can you translate it for me? She said, yes, Yetunde translates to the grandmother has returned. So it goes back to what I said before about the names having significance, that according to African traditions, that when one transitions, they go to the ancestor realm, and then they come back in human form and incarnate into the child. So they looked at this sister when she was born, and they said, oh, she has the mannerisms of the grandmother. So the idea is that these ancestors come back, and they come back, but they watch over us and they give us direction. Now, and I'm not an expert in African spirituality by no stretch of the imagination, but it is said that these ancestors guide us if we tap into the energy. See, this whole thing is about energy. Remember I said terms, TE stands for energy, and that we misplace our energy. And so if this is true, that the ancestors are waiting for us to tap into their energy, then they can guide us in the right directions. Now, this goes really to the heart of the Haitian Revolution, where Boukman, I'm sorry, I don't know the sister's name, but they invoked the African spirit to help them defeat the French. So they say that this was a spiritual battle, and it was a spiritual battle or spiritual energy that ignited, and that was the spark that led to the victory of the Haitians over the British and the French. It was another group that they fought against. So this is the idea that the African spirit is in existence. And I mentioned before that in my book, the last book, which I saw a couple of weeks ago, somebody told me it was selling on Amazon for $846. It has a great presentation. It's actually a speech by Donald Rumsfeld when he was the Secretary of Defense, and under George W. Bush, who was not very bright. But in that, he laid out the American spirit. And in that, it was a very chilling, sobering account of what the American spirit is and was and will be. And it is a vicious spirit that's willing to stop at nothing to achieve its aims and objectives. And it will do anything to stay on planet Earth. So that's the American spirit. So I'm coming and I'm saying, okay, there's an African spirit, and I'm asking what and how can the African spirit be used to not just counter the American spirit, but to crush the American spirit. So that is, at this point, how I see it. And I'm sure that this is, I'm going to evolve to a greater understanding of this as I get deeper into it. So right now, it is said on the continent, and I've seen evidence of this. Dr. Jeffries also talks about when he was in the dungeons communing with the ancestors and the spirits, when he got the word that when he came out with his curriculum of inclusion speech in Albany, New York, that there was this ushered in a firestorm against him. He said he was communing with the ancestors, and he asked the ancestors to protect him. And when and the different spiritual systems, out of the different spiritual systems, he was given certain things, and certain things were done for him. So when he went into the court, he walked into the court as a warrior. We have Alton Maddox, the attorney at war in New York, who also abides by this same concept of the African spirit. So I'm saying we got to just make this real. Let's see, on the Kambon-dime, I got a piece that says consistent, clear, consistent evidence. So we see clear, consistent evidence of the American, so-called American spirit. So now let's see it on the other side. Clear, consistent evidence that the African spirit is fighting for our liberation in this realm that's going to help us achieve a winning end game and take us to our destination and the finish line, which is black liberation in this realm.
In this realm, indeed. Context of White Supremacy, Dr. Kamau Kambon. I wanted to make sure I asked as well, with all the hysteria, I think they said $250 million was spent at the box office this weekend. Did you get a chance to see Marvel's Black Panther film to celebrate Black History Month, Dr. Kambon? Were you able to check it out?
No, I did not go, and we decided we were not going to go to support Disney. And I think the figure was, I heard a great warrior, Legrand Clegg, out of California yesterday. He said that that film generated $192 million in this country, 220-something million around the world, and 100 million on the continent. And Disney has always been an enemy of African people. And anytime white people put anything out, the first thing you should think of is motive. Motive. What is the motive? So now, I'm kind of pissed off at all the black, to this extent, that we have money to give Disney in that amount, but yet we have these black organizations. We have COWS, we have Harambe Radio, we have a Let's Buy Black 365, we have a BB Tumikasa, we have ASCAP, we have Black United Front, we have UNIA, we have all these black independent schools around the country trying to help people. We have community organizations that are trying to help people, but yet they have to beg for money from black people. So this is what I said before. I don't spend my money just anywhere. I'm engaged in black economic guerrilla warfare against white people. And I don't care what they produce, at least on this level. I don't go to the NBA games. I don't do none of that. Whitey can have all of that stuff. So I'm not on a yo-yo. And when I found out, I was going to go and check it out. But then I found out, Disney, they produced the Jungle Book. They always characterize black people as subhumans. That's their history. I remember Walt Disney and then Eisenberg and then these other people that took over Disney. They were later for Disney. And I also understand there's a good article by Brother Shabazz about this movie and the extraction of the wealth of black people from our people to the white people. And I might add, I've written to Tom Joyner. I wrote an article, I sent it to you, I don't think you saw it, an open letter to the black FM radio stations. And they go to Florida. They go to Florida every year for this thing, and they take thousands of black people to Disney World, to Florida, where they killed Trayvon Martin, where they killed Jordan Davis. Are you kidding me? Where they imprisoned the sister for shooting a gun up into the ceiling? And we're going to go there and spend thousands and thousands of dollars in white hotels and white restaurants. That is insanity. And what is the end game with it? What do you get from it? Now they got a gospel, a cruise. They got all these celebrities. And I might add, I don't pay any attention to actresses, actors, athletes. I don't care what they say or what they do. I'm not into them. They're under concept lockdown. They're in a stranglehold by the white people. So Malcolm said one time, one of the jive white presidents invited some athletes and actors to the White House. And Malcolm said, since when do actors and athletes speak for black people? So no, I didn't go to see it. And because I don't dig giving all this money, man, with all of our organizations and people who are struggling. And I'm going to mention this brother, Steve Coakley. This was really a great, great brother. He died, I think it was about 7 years ago. He brought us the idea of the Skull and Bones, the Boule, who's linked to the Skull and Bones, the Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, and all these different groups. The Rose Rothschild Connection, the secret societies and all that. And this brother, he literally gave his life. He invested all his time, energy, and resources into trying to pull our coat to the reality of the global and the interlocking war against us. And he died. He said, man, I don't have a house. I don't have a car. He said, I got a couple of pair of shoes, a couple of shirts. He lost all his teeth, and he couldn't get any support. Dr. Boris Shango, his book, The African People and European Holidays, Mental Genocide, book 1 and 2, among other books. He dies broke. Dale Jones dies broke. Dr. Ben languishing in a nursing home. So yeah, black people, what are you doing? So that's why I talk about us being in an emotional stranglehold. Right? An emotional stranglehold. And we are psychologically ensnared by the white people. So anytime a whitey does something, first thing I think of, what is the motive? So the next step is they got these cast of characters coming out again in about 3 or 4 months with the Black Panther in it. And because they have a Black Panther in it, black people are going to flock to it again and give Disney more money. So I'm like the brother, the Japanese guy. One guy waging war against the whole white system. Does that answer the question?
Question answered. I will only add, going back to terms, what you shared earlier, our use of time and energy. And certainly you highlighted brilliantly so the currency and so many different black people in black collectives that are doing great work trying to solve the problem on their cosmic assignment. And they didn't get $250 million to continue their efforts. Disney got $250 million plus, and that's just the first week or so of the film. But also our use of time and energy. I don't know how long that movie is, but however long folks are hanging out in the theater or in line to get tickets and costumes and everything else, that's probably a good 90 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it is, that you are not devoted to black liberation unless there is something really extraordinary in this Disney offering. But I cannot imagine. I mean, if that were the case, then the problem would have already been solved with the number of people that went to see that film. If that film was about black liberation, we wouldn't be on the air now. We could just be enjoying, the product. The person who dialed in, last 4 digits, 5136. Did you have a question for Dr. Kambon? You should be with us.
Yes, Gus. How you doing, Dr. Kambon?
Okay, good, brother. Good.
I basically just got a comment. I feel like, when the Black Panther came out, I believe it's like a litmus test for white people to see how childish black people minds are, because I just don't see how it made any kind of sense the way black people got together. Just one movie from white people. They finally put a movie up there that so-called put us in a positive light. And it seemed like black people lost their minds. They all out there in costumes, dancing. And we are in a pathetic situation right now. It's really, I mean, it's getting bad out here, just with,
You didn't have a question,
with black
sir?
people.
I did want to try to make
Just that comment, Gus. I just wanted to say that. Thank you for letting me share.
Appreciate it,
Good to talk to you, young Dr. Kambon.
And Danny Glover wanted to do, I think, the Haitian Revolution, and he couldn't get any financing for it. So it also goes back to the point that, we're starved to see images of ourselves, even if, at whatever cost. So I don't want to put down the whole thing, man, but just the fact that we just waste the resources that we do have. And I remember the C.O.W.S, that's the Black College tournament, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. When it was here in this area, I think 1 week, black people converged on this area and spent $25 million in 1 week. And then one of the fraternities had their national convention here. And these were both articles in the white newspaper. And when the black fraternity they had their national convention here, and they spent $10 million. Now, when we had the bookstore, we didn't see any of that money. The white restaurants, the hotels, the same usual suspects got all the money. So we got money for the things that we want. But and we've been down this road before, but I'm saying clearly that these white people are going to wipe us out. And they're in the process of wiping us out. And the evidence is clear before us with the prisons. We fill in the prisons. We fill in the hospitals. They're killing the children in the schools. They've driven us out of the homes that we had in the cities and made no provisions for us to go anywhere. The ranks of the homeless, the ranks are swelling disproportionately, and there are no jobs that are meaningful jobs for black people. And I've mentioned to you about the program we heard on NPR, Reveal, where they talked about Philadelphia and how they basically the banks are giving money to white people, even though the whiteys don't qualify for the loans that they're getting. And they're not giving loans to black people who are qualified to stay in their homes or to buy homes. So if that doesn't translate to our extermination, I don't know what does. I don't know what does. The chemtrails, all of this stuff. And a lot of the white people are not aware that they are on the way out as well. I think the white male understands this. If you saw an article a couple of years ago said that white men ages 44 to 55 are committing suicide and dying from drug overdoses. So they know that they're in a white welfare system. And the guys that come back from the war, they know that it's an illegal engagement in different parts of the world, and they're going over there and they're killing innocent people. So they come back and they're traumatized because they know. There was a picture I have in one of my books of these soldiers in Afghanistan. They killed these people, and these soldiers are standing over the dead bodies, and they're peeing on the bodies. There was another article where they were cutting off the body parts of some of these people they killed, putting them in jars and sending them back to the U.S. So they come back and they're traumatized because they know that, this is incorrect, that they are not treating human beings like human beings. And then we have our people who run interference for the white people. There's an excellent book entitled Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire out of Brazil. And he talks about the oppressors and the oppressed. And then he says, but there's another category called the sub-oppressors. And those are the people in our race who are oppressing their own people. So all these people who are doctors and lawyers, as Steve Copley says, we take all these oaths, the fraternities and the sororities, they never step up and talk about any of these issues. So they're in on the genocide. But if you go to Lerone Bennett and his Forced into Glory analysis of Lincoln, he says that Lincoln talked about getting all of these black people out of the country. He said he don't care if they light or dark, rich or poor, intellectual or not intellectual, educated or uneducated. He said he wants all of them out. So when do we get the message that we need to drop all of these titles, buying all of this crap, these cars and the big TVs and all of that? Man, we've been talking about this stuff for years and years and years. And the people, they're not changing. They don't want to hear it. And the people are going to continue to suffer and die. And the richest people in the black communities, the richest one is the funeral parlor directors and the casket makers and the tombstone makers and the pharmacies. These are the people who are extracting the wealth from black people who are bent on, through no fault of their own, subtle suicide and not so subtle suicide. So we have these people, Lerone Bennett, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Malcolm, all these people came and talked to us. And so we talk about, we love the ancestors, but yeah, are you listening to what they said? Are you doing what they said? But we venerate, the ancestors. Yeah, but they said this, they said that. Marcus Garvey said that those who are aware should go among the millions of unthinking masses and convince them of what's going on. George Jackson said that we have to settle our quarrels because basically, I'm paraphrasing, but basically there's war against us. War is being waged against us. So he says settle your quarrels. So I'm saying that we should drop all of this madness that's in our race, the titles, the differences, because the enemy, as I've said so many times before, doesn't care about any of that. They don't care what your belief system is, what your astrological sign is. They don't care about your religion, of course. They don't care about your philosophy. None of that. And as soon as we come to that, as soon as we realize, REALEYES, realize that, we will be in far better shape. And so I think that we have to respect sisters, and sisters have to respect themselves, stop dealing with these jive brothers who come and sweet talk the sister. They get in bed, and out pops this baby, and the brother cuts out. That's unacceptable, man. That's unacceptable. And leaving these sisters with these children to raise, and all these black children in foster care. But we got millions and millions of dollars to spend on a movie. Come on, man. What are you all going to do? I got this little video, old video, Clarence and Angel, the little brother who couldn't read, and this Puerto Rican teaches them how to read, and at the end of the movie, the brother's getting up because the black teacher kept kicking him out of the classroom. And at the end, when he learns how to read, the teacher's not paying attention to him, and he's standing up and he's reading, and he's so proud, and he says, "Are you listening to me? Are you listening to me?" So that's what I'm saying. I said, "Yeah, I'm praying. Are you listening? War is being waged against us. Let's solve this problem once and for all. And let's stop committing subtle suicide and stop engaging with our enemy and helping and being a buffer for the enemy against our rise toward our black liberation."
Person that dialed in, I think you're on the free HD line. Different person that dialed in on the free HD line. You had a question for Dr. Kambon. You should be with us.
Is that me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Greetings, Gus. Greetings, Dr. Kambon, and to all the listeners and callers. Gus, may I make a very short comment to ask my question?
I reckon.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I haven't seen the Black Panther film, but all the reviews I've seen, they said that there was one Black American who wanted to use the advanced military technology of the Afrikans in the movie to arm revolutionaries to engage in counter war against white supremacy. And what they ended up doing to him is that they demonized him and made him the villain, and his own cousin killed him instead of, granting his request. So in trying to find a consolation for all the people, because I haven't seen the film, all the people who came out to see this seemingly very dangerous film, my question is, how much money do you think the Black people get? Because, of course, it has a mostly Black cast, which we know they're not going to get the majority, but they also have a Black director and things like that. So particularly like the directors and stuff like that, how much do you think that they're going to get from all of this versus Marvel and Disney? And I'll meet my line. Thank you.
Yeah, I heard 5%. They get about 5%, but I don't know, since I don't really follow that tough. Yeah, I don't follow all that. I listen to some of the dialogue that people had, but I'm really out of all of that. I just don't want to be engaged in that and take up my time and energy talking about that and all this stuff. Guy told me, I listened to his brother. He said, he was out at the NBA All-Star game. Come on, man. You went out there, you drinking alcohol and partying, still doing that stuff. Man, people don't get it. Dr. Barbara Sizemore has that great lecture. Black folks just don't get it. So I got this expression, when you don't get it, meaning being terrorized and being destroyed, when you don't get the idea that is happening. So when you don't get it, you will get it. And by the time you get it, if you get it at all, you would have gotten God, meaning that the white people will get you. So I see some of these brothers when they used to come in the bookstores, yeah, man, I just got out of prison. So, yeah, they got you. Yeah, they got me. And when they get in there, I got a brother that was in for a while, and he got out. He said, man, you used to tell me what was going on, but I didn't get it. He said, but I did some time in prison. Now I got it. Yeah, but it's kind of late. Now you got this felony on your record, and they got it hooked up where you can't move, you can't do anything. So what we're trying to do is prevent you from getting got. So, so that's it as far as that movie. I don't want to spend any more time on the movie.
Amen. Amen. Time and energy, one of the big things. I mean, the actual coins, that's significant as well, but time and energy and just what our brain computer is focused on is hugely important. I think Bob Law talked about that as well. I think Dr. Kambon even recommended Mr. Law, who's been a guest on our program a few times, but he talked about that on this broadcast, that a lot of times we, particularly with entertainment, we are thinking in terms of how many records we're going to sell and all of the play we're going to get, and they're in the business of trafficking ideas and concepts to maintain and promote white terror domination. I think even Dr. Kambon has said that generally tends to trump everything, even when they're talking about billions of dollars. Their number one priority always the maintenance of white terror domination, white supremacy worldwide. Could be an error. Did you have anything else you wanted to get in before we get ready to wrap things up and let you enjoy the rest of your evening and get quality rest? Huge aspect of self-care. Anything you wanted to get into, listeners, Dr. Kambon, before we let you go?
Well, I honor Malcolm X, and I think my brother, he and Dr. King, among others, Paul Robeson and others, have really given their and I separate their lifetime. See, we all have this time that we live, so they've given their lifetime to advancing and to helping us realize our liberation. That really was the end game for most of them. So I'm saying that, let's disengage and disentangle and decouple from these open-ended streams of thought and idea formations that have no end game. They keep us on this stationary bike. And, we're trying to get away, but we're not going anywhere. And we keep going over the same things over and over and over again. And we can see that the things that we have been doing, listen carefully to this, the things that a majority of black people have been doing have not helped us achieve our liberation from under white terror domination. So my question is, why would we continue to do those same things? So I said that we have, and let me just correct this, I hear this a lot. The people who are speaking, they say a vast majority of people. There's no such thing as a vast majority. It's just a majority. So anytime you hear somebody say a vast majority, I guess it's a cliche or something. But see, a majority of our people are just locked in. They are psychologically ensnared. They are in an emotional stranglehold. They are so tethered to whatever they're into, they can't decouple from it emotionally. They are under conceptual lockdown. And then they fight each other to see whose strand of thought is better. And so on my Kambon-dime, I got a little piece in there. It says, these are some of the statements that black people make. Oh, I ain't trying to hear it. And then the other one is, oh, yeah, but what I'm doing is different. See, everybody say, oh, yeah, but this is different. But, yeah, we're in the same condition. What's the evidence that this has gotten us closer to our liberation? See, because it's not clear that we should have a destination in this realm. What's the destination? Where's this thing taking you? So I heard this one black reporter say years ago, we're going to pass on our legacy. So I know the guy. I said, what legacy is he talking about? Christianity, fraternities, sororities, the black church? I mean, what is he talking about passing on to children? So I think the children are going to hate the adults, the black adults, I'm telling you. When the children get hip to what's really going on, and they see the stark reality of this world, and I may have mentioned this before, this brother called me from California, young brother, he said, man, we hate our parents out here. Our parents are locked into this Christianity, it's a bunch of foolishness, and we can't disengage them from this stuff. So we're locked into these things. We are culturally frozen. They say, yeah, I'm cultural. Okay, well, what exactly does that mean? When a cop stops you, what does your culture do? Will your culture stop him from giving you a ticket or killing you? I don't know. I'm just asking that question. and then we are intellectually immobilized. And then, like this film, I'll say this about the film. If you go back to my earlier discussions, I said that under wrong concepts, I think it was, I said that what white people do, they create dilemma and paradox for us. Dilemma and paradox. And when we're engaged in dilemma and paradox, we're always trying to figure out, well, what should we do? Is it this or is it that? And that eats up our time. So this film is a textbook classic example of dilemma paradox. And so what the whitey does, also in this area, it says that what the white people do is that they take the truth, they know that we vibe with the truth, and they tie a lie to the truth. And we cannot differentiate and separate the lie from the truth. So we take the whole thing. It's like taking a little bottle that has a beautiful, beautiful label with an African man on it, an African woman dressed in royal clothing, and inside the bottle is arsenic or lethal poison. So that's the bottle looks good, but what's inside? So they take the truth and tie to the truth a pure, straight-up lie. Dilemma, paradox. So what do we do? So I say the answer to that is always decide in favor of the self. Always decide in favor of the self and preserving the self and the different selves. So finally, protect and save all your different selves and organize a personal plan for each self. And I have a lot of this in some of my books, The Last Black Man Standing, The Declaration, Duped Parents. I have 16 books, most of them are e-books. And a lot of this information, I got all this stuff, man. I spent all these years writing all this. So people walk right by. I said, oh, wow, y'all some deep people, man. So that's all I have to say, brother. I appreciate the invitation to spend time with you. I hope it was constructive, but as I said before, you got to deconstruct. You got to break it down, tear it up before you can construct. You can't construct on mud like the people out in California. They under all that mud. They can't build no homes on that mud. So you got to break it up, break it down. Now you got something solid that you can build on. So I thank our great grandsister Malcolm, Omawali, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz for his great significant contribution. He's gargantuan in the pantheon of utmost magnificent heroes and sheroes. And all the other ones that I remember all the time. Every day I think about all of them, man. Steve Coakley, Dr. Khalid, George Jackson, Jonathan Jackson, Bunchy Carter, Little Bobby Hutton, Dr. Richard King, Dr. Welsing, Ida B. Wells, David Walker. I mean, all of these great, great people, man. Too many to name. But I think about them, and I hope that our people can tap into their spirit and come on and be on the right side of history. And the only right side of history is black liberation, because black liberation gets us from under white terror, domination, and defeat. Madasi, which is thank you, and Chief out of Ghana. Appreciate it.
KamauKambon.org, the website, KamauKambon.org. Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your Wednesday evening. I know you prize being able to get quality rest. Please continue to take excellent care of yourself. We appreciate your scholarship, your insight, definitely your suggestions on things that we can do to solve this problem immediately. We will remain on duty. I know you are as well. Take excellent care, and thank you again for sharing some of your time with us, Dr. Kambon.
Okay, thank you, brother. I appreciate it. I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity and profoundly thankful to spend time with Africans. And, I love, despite what some may think, I really love African people, man. And I want to see the best for us. So that's why I ask Africans to take the best care of themselves, because we really need everybody in this war that we're waging for our liberation. This is not just a talk, man. This is very, very serious. So we need to be equally serious in order to achieve our goal. So thank you again, man, and good evening.
Fantastic evening, Dr. Kambon. Take excellent care, and we will speak soon, sir.
Okay. All right. Black liberation.
Black liberation.
Our people are very serious about not being very serious. Meanwhile, white people are very serious about playing hardball against us. And this hardball is called genocide.
Context of white supremacy. He talked about the importance of us being serious in countering the system of white supremacy just before his exit. That classic line from Dr. Kambon, the importance of being serious cannot be emphasized enough. That's it. Incidentally, it began snowing in the middle of the broadcast here in Seattle. That generally is like news flash because it normally does not snow here very frequently, maybe once per winter. And it did snow here on December 24th and December 25th. So this is a little bit, and I mean a little bit more snow than we are accustomed to. It's not, tons, but it is enough to say, oh, wow. It's snowing and continuing. It's still coming down a little bit as we speak. That's it. Again, we'll be here tomorrow for Workplace Racism, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Dial in if you have problems, counter-racist suggestions, codification. If you have seen where some things work well, dial in, let us know, and we'll finish up the Wisdom of Psychopaths this Friday, also 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's it. I definitely want to thank all the folks who have supported us for 9 years. I hope it has helped folks who have listened in get a more accurate understanding of what racism, white supremacy is, how it works, things we can do to help solve this problem. We certainly do not want to waste our time, energy, resources at all. Dr. Kambon talked about that explicitly. If you are not getting constructive information from this broadcast, man, there are so many problems, so much to be done. You should be tuning in, investing your efforts elsewhere. We do not have time to waste. There should be a sense of urgency as we go about the business of counter racism. That's it. Thanks everyone for participating. We will be here about 24 hours from now. Take excellent care of yourselves. Maximize self-care. Dr. Kambon talked about that. I've emphasized that. I think that's a huge component of Black self-respect, self-care, especially if you are in acute times. Make that one of your number one priorities, self-care. In that vein, sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. Alcohol, really all of racists, narcotics, poisons, they have done extraordinary work keeping us poisoned, not able to think clearly, and really where they can take advantage of us when we are in intoxicated states. You can think of that as counter racism for economics as well. So we're not having to spend any of our nickels on white poisons. Certainly, if you are going to be out and about in a vehicle, you do not want to be under the influence. If you are driver, passenger, even if you're a pedestrian, and have that be the moment that you get stopped by Daniel Holtzclaw, any of these other race soldiers, war is being waged against us. I think that should be reflected in our behavior at all times, and making sure that we are able to make quality decisions at any time. You never know when you might have to make a split-second life-saving decision in the system of white supremacy. It happens all the time. That's it. And if you're in a vehicle, buckle up. I know someone who just got a ticket for that, and a non-white person who just got a ticket for that. Buckle up if you're going to be in a vehicle. Let's do everything we can to minimize contact with race soldiers, badge or no. That's it. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other Black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of Black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another Black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.